Sorry. So in this video, we're going to start making our main game scene. And so the first thing I want to do first is actually I want to reuse this sort of static. So I'm gonna go into our prefabs folder and name this. I'm just gonna name it noise, TV noise. Be a little bit more informative. And I'll drag and drop that to our prefab so I can use that again. So I don't have to redo the animation and that sort of thing in our next scene. So great. And I'm going to navigate to our scenes folder, go back into main game. I'm gonna save it. Actually, it might be a good chance to sort of publish our changes. So we'll say top menu complete, and we'll publish that. And now in our main game, I want to zoom in on our camera a little bit. I want to start setting up the scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the bottom 3/4 of our screen to do our remote stuff. And the top one is going to be actually like in world space physical items with animations and that sort of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of the prefabs and sprites that we've had before. So I have scene sprites. And actually, we don't ever need house interior. That's trash. So I'm actually going to delete that. Whoops. I shouldn't have added that to this last project. But we have something called Telly. And how this works is we're going to show anything that's on this TV. We're going to show it behind this. So what this means is we can put sprites behind this sprite. And if it's a little too big, then that's fine. The TV will catch it, and we'll make sure that the sprite doesn't go over the edges of our TV or whatever. So it's a little too big, so I'm gonna try maybe 0.5 or something. I should have looked at what the size was. 0.4. That looks about right, and then I'm gonna move it up into the top of our scene. -1 and 4 maybe. That looks pretty decent. And then our old lady is going to be on this sort of side. So if I go in the prefabs, I've already created for you an animator for this lady, as well as put all her sprites together and a prefab with all the game objects. So you can see that she's sort of clipping through our other one. And what we're going to do, if we look at old lady, she has, look at her sprites. They've already have some, in the prefab, we've already established the different orders in the layer, and it's above and below 0, which this one is default at 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this is always behind the old lady by doing -10 or something like that. And our old lady we can position at maybe 1.5, 1.475, something like that, and then 4. We'll adjust this later once we have our UI canvas. So let me introduce you to this fine old lady here, and the animation that she already comes with. So we have an idle animation that we're going to use for her when we're working in the scene and trying to do whatever she's asking of us. And it loops, and it's great. And we look at the animator, and it looks like this. This is our default state, and it'll go into different default states depending on some specific parameters. And so if I go into the scene and I do happy, after like 4 or 5, I don't know, successful actions, the game's going to speed up, and then she's going to show that we've been doing a good job. So she claps at us. Anytime she's demanding something of us, she'll do a talking animation, and she'll go, "Arr!" And then she's also, if we fail, then she's going to be angry, and she's going to slam her fists down. Also, there's transitions between some of the animations, like if you're turning forward, she does this little quick animation, or turning back, I mean, if she's turning forward, then she slams her fists down after she's done talking to you and waits for us to like be done with our action. So that's a little intro to her animations. If you want to see like sort of some of the stuff that I'm doing, I didn't want to, the sort of animation stuff takes a long time, and I didn't want to bog down the project with you having to recreate the animations. Same with one of these, like my soap opera animation. It's pre-created, or it's part of our asset folder, so we don't have to adjust that, so that's nice. But we will do some of the more simpler animations, just so you can get some practice. All right, so let's set up our canvas. So I can go here, create a canvas. If I double click that, and it already comes with an event system. So in this canvas, I'm actually going to create a panel. So if I go here and I could create a UI panel, and a panel is a great way to hold anything by sections. So it automatically comes with an image, and we don't necessarily, actually we can use that. So we can call this the remote panel. Remote panel. And then we can make this the background of the remote. So if you look into my sprites, I have some sprites for you here. I'm going to reorganize this sort of title text, so that's in our animations. And then I'm going to create a new folder just to keep organized. Text animations. Soap opera, TV noise, animations. Okay. And then put this in text animation. I'm going to try to keep organized throughout this. When you create an animation like that, it just pops it in whatever folder you're in. So try to be more mindful of that. All right. Sorry to get distracted. Remote panel. So yeah, if you look into my UI sprites folder, I have a number of different UI sprites that I've created, and let me sort of show you. I think it already has the settings that we want, but I want to show you what that is. So I have this sort of top rounded sprite, and on a simple sprite it'll look like this. I'm gonna hit undo because I don't want that. But if you look here in the sprite editor, from the assets folder, it already has, I can sort of revert. Okay. It already has like these sort of lines here. So what happens is the sprite comes like this, right? We'll have nothing. But if we see these little green boxes and we drag them, we can sort of create a border for our object. And it turns out that for this specific sprite, I specifically made the size of the border here to be 75. So I can input 75 here just to make sure that it's sort of perfect. And if I hit apply, now with the sprite, if we use it as a UI element, as I do here, there's an image, and I select. This one is called top rounded corners. We can either do simple, it'll like just scale everything at the same size. But if we do a sliced image, and we fill the center, so we can make that We can make it borders only if we wanted to, if we deselect that. It'll keep the size of the borders at 75 always. So at whatever the sprite size is, the borders will stay the same. And then it'll fill anything between the borders and scale it to however we want it. So that's really nice. And we're going to use this. It's a gray background and we want it to be somewhat black. And we want the opacity to be, we don't want it to be clear at all. So we can do, I don't know, like 50. Maybe that's a little too dark. We want it maybe like 100. Nope, it's too light. 75. I don't know, we can mess around with this. Let's try 50 for now, and then we can edit it. Okay, so with this one, like I said, we only want it to take up like 3/4 of the screen, maybe 4/5. So we're gonna try changing the max of this to be 0.75. That's a little bit too large. We can't, or too much space. We want this to we want to create an illusion and sort of make sure that this old lady like isn't showing this clipped area here. So maybe we'll make it 0.8 instead. That's actually, it seems just about how we had it before. So we want to have a large working space anyways, so we just need the top part of this to show off our different little actions. Okay, so I also have a sort of texture that seemed pretty nice. You see it on some remotes that I want to use here. So I'm gonna create another image or a panel. These are really similar. They just come up with like different default images. And so this one, I'm going to drag and drop what's called like tileable metal textures 4. And I'm going to make this like a really dark texture, like 50 or something like that. We can change that again. And I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to change the anchors to be kind of like that. It's not bad. And if you remember, so I want this image to be just exactly where this filled image is. And you remember how we're doing this is like we have a 75 width border no matter what. So if we take this image and I'm gonna like rename it remote texture, something like that, then we know that we can go in 75 on each of these because that border is 75. And that fits almost perfectly into our little border. Cool. I don't know if I want this to be a little bit lighter. Let's see. No. 55. That's fine. Okay. So next, so you want to think about how you're parenting things. So you see that I just saw, or I just like, I parented this image with this panel, and you want to think about it like if you scale any of these, what do you want to scale with it? So if I go into like something different, then this will sort of scale with this. We want this size to be relative, to its parent. That sort of makes sense, right? We want it to be within a certain window of the parent, so that's why we've grouped them together. There's something else that we can do with this image is we have it simple, but we could do tiled too. So what that means is if this grows or shrinks, since it's a tiled image, no matter how it shrinks, the size of these little texture marks are going to be the same. There'll just be more of them. If we do simple, then it will scale wider or shorter, however we scale it. So if we want to keep consistent, we can do tiled because this is a tileable texture. That's great. Now I want to start creating some buttons here. And I want to do it in a very specific way. So in this game, we have a number of different panels that we're going to use to send events to the game manager. And the way we're going to organize that is within a grid system. So let me introduce you to that grid system. So I'm going to create another panel for which I want to be parented under here, and even parented under there. So I want to make sure it's no larger than this sort of remote space. I also want to leave a little bit of room on the top for, I forgot to do this last time, but I want to check how many times that you've won and keep a score or something like that over there. Maybe I'll do that with the timer bar. Who knows? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to. I don't want it to go all the way to the bottom. We'll probably keep adjusting this because we don't want. Because the grid is going to be at a specific size. I'll talk more about that later. But so I want to leave a little bit of room at the top. So maybe I'll do like 0.9, something like that. All right. So in this panel, we can keep the image for now just for visualization, but I'll probably remove it later. So in this panel, what we're going to do is we're going to create a grid system in which we can put all of our sort of panels on. And this is where it gets a little bit wonky. So if I add a component and I'd say grid, a few things pop up. So I can get a grid layout group or a grid. If I type in layout, you can see even more options. So grid, horizontal layout group and vertical layout group that allow me to organize elements either in a list vertical or a list horizontal, but we want both, so we're going to use the grid layout group. Now, any of children of this panel, I'm going to call this the grid panel, and then I'll just create another image just so you can see. Any image in this panel is going to sort of retain the elements of the grid layout group from before. So if I do 200, it modifies all the children under this parent to be like a 200 size square. Make them width like 200 too. So if I'm just gonna make this like a grid empty image. I don't know. Grid test image. So I could create several of these if I duplicate it. You can see each one of these, even if I try to scale it, it's going to retain the size of the grid layout group here. One thing that's kind of sucks for this is if we change the aspect ratio to something else, it's going to always retain a hard coded 200 value here. So if we were going to make this game for different resolutions, we would have to have some sort of script that goes into this grid layout group and finds a resolution of gets a resolution of our screen and then modifies this to be the appropriate size so that all of our elements are the same. And if we mess around with our grid panel, I'm going to, I can also make sure that it's spaced apart so that we can see each individual element. So if I say, make sure that I have a space of 10 and 10, so if I have another one, make sure to leave a space here and here, and that's fine. We can change the start corner to be like, I can start from the bottom or start from the upper right. And we want the child alignment to be, right now it's at the top left, so if we do like lower right, it'll go all the way down here. That's basically like an anchor for how it starts building these, right? If we make it vertical, then it'll fill it up like this. So actually what I want is, I want it to start building from the upper left. That's the start corner. But if we do upper center, then that sort of centralizes our sort of our little boxes so that it's in the middle. So that's kind of also to note, if you look at these, like I said, you can't scale it. There's even a message here that tells us, like, if you try to mess with this rect transform other than the scale itself, then so some of these values are going to be driven by grid layout group. All right, so every one of these children are going to retain the same size as this grid panel. So if we keep duplicating this, we can sort of make a makeshift grid that we can see everything. That's kind of nice. Let's do like one more. We might want to, for consistency's sake, we might want to have like a fixed row count or a fixed column count. I kind of want to do a 4 by something grid layout. So I may have it like a fixed at 4. It's kind of what it was before anyway, so that's all right. So we have a makeshift grid just using these little objects. But as we're making panels, we're going to have panels of different sizes, and we don't want to like just segment every one of our panels into 4 panels. So how can we actually really use this? This is a little bit restricting, right? But what we can do is we can sort of think about it like Legos, right? Okay, I pulled up an image of Legos. So Legos come in several different sizes and shapes, but what they do is they have a very consistent parts that connect to each other. So you can see the bottom of one here and the top of one here. This is always the same size, so this will always be able to connect into, actually it's not this, it's like this element here, this little space. It's actually the space outside of the little circles, right? So if we think about our grid kind of like Legos work, then we can make a panel but make sure that our parent is this sort of grid size. And then when we have created a panel, we can just like make sure that we've allocated enough space with sort of empty objects to make sure that it's in the right spot. So this might be sort of a strange way for you to think about it, but because I don't know if I'm going to go so far in this project that we're going to randomize the sort of panels, or at least that I'm going to make you guys do that. I might just sort of provide that for you, just so at the end of the day, or when we've completed this project, we have a sort of method where we can bring in these panels and we can have like a shuffle panel option where it shuffles all our panels around, and every time we boot up the game, it'll be different. It'll change up the gameplay, so it'll add some gameplay value to it, so we're not playing the same game over and over. Have some randomization element. So this is why I'm doing it this way. So using a grid panel, how you're going to create your panels is you're going to create, you can create even an empty, oops, under here, create empty, and it has a rect transform. And you can see that this empty object immediately has the size of the grid panel group. We can move it to the top up here, and now we'll see that this is sort of the spot that we're working in. So with each new panel that we create, you're going to have a parent object, and then that retains a 100 by 100. And then you're going to create a child of that. And this one is not restricted. This one can be larger or smaller than the parent. So that's really nice. We can do set it to 0, 0 and have it stretch all the way. And now our anchors can go further than 0 and 1. We can make it 0 and 2. We can make the y 0 and 2, so it has like this big like 4 by 4. Or if we, depending on where we want our like sort of Lego piece connector to be, we can make this like it goes all the way from -1 to -1 to 1, and we make sure that's zeroed out. And maybe we want this to be 3, so it's a 3 size panel, and then make this from -2 to 1. So it's in the top right corner, but we have all this space to work with now. If we add an image object, we can see that it covers all of this space, right? Now we're going to have to make sure that these sort of objects are empty so that we can actually see these. So, but we'll sort of do that later. We can just create a little bit of space for us right now, and make the images like sort of this empty objects here. All right, so now this child of a child of the grid panel, this is where we're going to make our first panel, which is going to be a number pad. So we'll do that next video.